Are we live? Right, we are live. Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to the Meat of the Matter podcast, where we meet and you matter. That's Mark, he's Peter, I'm Tony, and we've got some stuff to talk about today. We're going to answer some questions, get involved with this, get active. It's snowing here in Vancouver, which is kind of crazy. It doesn't happen very often, but it's a nice day for a podcast. We're going to get into some talks about, straight up, what is blood work necessary? How people interpret blood work? What can happen if you even use it or not? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What we dwelling on blood work, focusing on these markers. We've got a lot to say about it, and we might get into some protein modified fasting, a little bit of details about that. Mark's had some questions. So guys, how we doing today? Mark, let's start with you. Let's start this off with, do you use blood work as any markers? And if you do, what are your thoughts on it, just in general?
No, I don't do any blood work whatsoever. I don't do any glucose monitors either. I know pretty much when I'm in ketosis. Very, very simple. I just know I can smell it in my urine. I just have really, really good energy. So when it comes to looking at these issues, none whatsoever.
Right on. Well, and we'll get into that because I have some thoughts about that. But Peter, being a type 1 diabetic, obviously you have to monitor your glucose, specifically, when you have to dose your insulin. But what about you? What do you think? What are your thoughts on blood work?
Yeah, so already before I became health conscious, to say it like that, I of course had to go to the hospital every half year for my type 1 diabetes, and they will do the typical tests, A1C of course, lipid panels, maybe B12, your kidney function, that sort of stuff. And basically, I also didn't find it very interesting when I was still relatively healthy as a beginning type 1, because at the beginning it can be still relatively easy. And my lipid panels were perfect, according to the standard reference charge that LDL has to be low and that sort of things. I was following a mixed diet, so it makes sense. Everything was always all right, so I didn't pay too much attention to it either, actually. But yeah, nowadays I'm happy that I am tested, say, once a year or so.
Okay, so basically we have two sides of the coin here. Well, Peter, you have markers in your blood that you need to keep track of. Mark is more, flying by the natural side, and coming from my thoughts on blood work specifically, because a lot of my clients and a lot of my family now, they consult me or they ask me for my opinion on their blood work, because here's the problem I have with the way the blood work is now. One, in Canada, it's very hard to get a doctor to sign off on the markers that you want to be looking at. That's what I was very general. They'll do a white blood cell panel, a white blood cell count, which is very effective at seeing if you have an infection, which makes sense. It's your immune system. They'll do a red blood cell, which can be very, very tricky because it's the size, the volume, which can be a marker. But then, they just basic lipids, your basic cholesterol, fasting glucose, kidney function, and maybe liver function. But the funny thing is about this, and this is sort of my take on it, is when you do the initial blood draw, you could test everything. Like, they could run everything, but very often the doctors won't. They'll just pick and choose some markers. And so I have a real tough time with people that get blood work. They're feeling really good, and then one marker is out of whack, and it's just a random blood test. So I believe you can use blood work, and it can tell a story. But one marker, when a doctor has 10 minutes to tell you something, that can lead to sort of getting in your head that it's not really necessary. So, Mark, when we're talking about, like, let's start with you, because you don't use it, you don't care. And I believe, to be honest with you, I just look at this logically and say, what did we do before there was blood work? How would we have ever lived if we didn't know all these things? So coming from that, how do you tell people that you're helping or that you're coaching your clients that, feeling good is important? And how do you steer them to where you're at?
that's the main thing you were saying there, Tony. I want to know how you're feeling. So I've had clients in the past that would have had blood work done, and the one thing that came up on it would have been like cholesterol. We need to bring cholesterol down. But when I ask these people, okay, how do you feel? They're like, okay, I don't feel good, and that's when I would come in and say, okay, well, we're going to push that to the side. We're going to focus on getting your cholesterol up to where it should be. So most people will come to me with a cholesterol reading maybe of around 140 to around 170, which is extremely low.
Yeah.
And when I tell people, like, listen, I don't get any blood work done, but I can assure you my cholesterol is probably over 300, maybe 350. And I'm going with how I feel. Yeah. I'm going with the amount of energy, and that's how I know I'm deep into ketosis. I'm highly fat adapted. So that's the one thing I want to make sure when I take on people is, like, first of all, we're going to get that cholesterol up. We're not bringing that cholesterol down more. Okay, forget about other readings. Forget about what your doctor says. We're getting that cholesterol up. You're going on a high-fat diet. Your energy is going to be so much better. You're going to feel amazing. And if you feel amazing, don't worry about what your doctor says.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that's a very valuable point, because just before we get to you, Peter, I just want to say, like, when you're feeling good, what do we ask? Do we go to the doctor? No. You feel good. There's nothing to really. Now, as you get older and things start to change and you start to feel something, that would be the time to go get tested and to see, just to make sure there's nothing crazy going on. But what I find, and Peter, because you're very, very much a part of this, like, for your diabetes, and it's a good idea to check under the hood and make sure everything's working properly. But I believe that they're now, and it's a fact, they've moved the goalpost where they're not checking the blood work against the healthiest people. They're checking the blood work against the mainstream, normal, average person. So if the average person, and we would agree, is metabolically unhealthy, what are you comparing it against? That already sets everything out of whack. And in my opinion, it drives everybody towards lifestyle medications. Your cholesterol, your blood pressure.
Yeah, I just want to pick up one other point as well. I deal with an awful lot of women that have PCOS, and with PCOS, it's a metabolic issue and it's a hormonal issue. Now, what happens is when these people go to the doctor and they get blood work, the doctor will turn around and say to them, like, listen, it's impossible to be fertile. It's going to be impossible to reverse this. It's going to be impossible to fall pregnant. All this. And then when you look at the medication they're actually giving these people, these are actually diabetes medications. They're diabetes medications. And when you look at what they're being fed, like sugar constantly, it's no wonder these people are deflated when they actually go to see their doctor. And it's absolutely horrendous when I see a lot of these people and they're been told, like, listen, your chances of giving birth are zero. Yeah. And I'm not even a doctor. I'm not even a doctor. I've never once claimed I am a doctor. But it's amazing how women can come to me and within months I can reverse this condition, and these women are able to give birth.
No doubt. And we're going to get back to that, because I think there's a lot of good little gems there, Mark. But Peter, when you're getting your blood tested, how often, like, do you look at it from a baseline, from like every 6 months? You just look, and has there ever been a time where the doctor has said, or anything has been out of whack and you've been like, whoa, what's that? Or are you pretty much consistent?
To me, it didn't happen too much. I mean, I've had the story also with white blood cells and that sort of things that are elevated when I'm ill. But basically, you don't ever do anything with it unless you have really some special condition, but you will probably feel it as well. Yeah. But I do think that there is a little bit of nuance to whether taking blood tests is necessary or not on a regular basis. So some tests, like an A1C, maybe even a fasted blood glucose test, because you can do it at home, can be very valuable to do, say, once a year or so, even if you are feeling perfectly healthy, because especially if you're becoming pre-diabetic, the first years you could feel still very, very great. Your pancreas is just ramping up the insulin production, and if it's not too much insulin that you're producing, you'll feel great nonetheless. So that's a really tricky marker. And to me, it happened actually in the past. I was 18 years old. Well, I'm young. I feel great. And even if you're at a blood glucose level of, say, 140 milligrams per deciliter, you can feel great because you're young, you're active. Maybe you feel actually even greater than normally because you would be hyperactive because of the higher blood glucose. But I got measured as a young guy. I got measured a very high blood glucose and sent back home because it was just in reference range. The reference range goes up to, back then it went up to 180.
Oh, God. Wow.
As a young guy, of course, that makes no sense.
Yeah. No
but anyway, let me think where I was getting to. So nowadays, since I know that I have type 1 diabetes, it's just a regular checkup. But personally, I think actually if you manage your disease well, nowadays I feel high blood glucose very easily. Also, if it's just like 120, I start to feel it already. So if anything is out of whack, it would. I would feel it before even seeing it in blood labs.
No doubt. And now when we're talking like what Mark was saying too about PCOS and Peter, because you're a type 1 diabetic, and it's kind of funny how all roads lead us back to insulin. Now the test, there's a HOMA-IR, whatever it says, homeostatic, whatever insulin resistance test they can do. It's the same blood draw apparently. It's not you don't have to take more tests, but they don't do it. Any doctor and what I found when someone asks, you can get some naturopaths, but you have to pay $200, in Canada anyway, $200, $300 to get your fasting insulin tested. And it's you have to ask for it. Most doctors say you don't need it. And that's one thing that if you could do that over time, if our medical system, and listen, I'm not dogging doctors because they get taught something. And imagine, we are not doctors, we are not scientists, but when we talk about taking control of your health, doctors are taught by other doctors that are taught a curriculum and a standard of care. So when they come into this, they have to do their certain ways, or they can get into trouble, which is unfortunate because we have 24/7 every day, every breath of our lives. We can take responsibility for this. But that's why that one test could change everything. If we could measure our fasting insulin from an early age, you could see the disease progress way ahead of time. Now,
that's exactly true. And let me add to that fasting insulin is very useful. I forgot about it a minute ago because that's obviously maybe even more important than A1C, because if you're pre-diabetic, your A1C can be actually still all right.
Yeah.
But also for the distinction between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, which sometimes can take years before the home practitioner realizes that somebody is actually type 1 instead of type 2. This can be checked by checking fasting insulin levels, or by looking at this C-peptide levels.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a good one, Tony. You talked about HOMA-IR, and I actually forgot that's not the glucose tolerance test, right? It's a ratio between blood level and insulin, I think. And
that's actually the Kraft test. That's actually a good way to see how your insulin's working, for one. So these are the things that we talk about. And Mark, you're coming from a place where, because feeling it, these are certain things if your diet is a certain way and you're addressing the metabolic side of this, it can be a better marker by feeling good, because it doesn't matter where you're at. All roads lead to the same resolution. You can either go medication and just manage things, or you can address your metabolic health with diet. Now, one more test I wanted to mention before we get back to you, Mark, is cholesterol, our atherosclerotic plaque. So you'll get high cholesterol. The doctor will try and put you on a statin. there's a test. It's called a coronary arterial calcium score, a test. They take a picture of your arteries in your heart. They can see the disease if there's plaque forming, but they don't do it. My mother, like, I won't get into the story, but anyway, she got it done. And there you go. She had her results. You could see it. Okay, where do we go from here? So before we just, you're feeling great, you get a cholesterol elevated LDL, and the doctor instantly puts you on a statin. But yet they don't look at the disease progress, and the test is very easy, but they don't do it. So when we're looking at this, Mark, like, I love how you're saying that, like, how you're feeling. Now, what happens when someone says, I have high blood pressure? What do you what's your thoughts on that? Because it's not really
again, this is all down to insulin resistance. See, a lot of people will come and say that, okay, I have high blood pressure, so I should be reducing the salts, and things like that. I should be reducing my fat intake, but it's got nothing to do with that.
No.
Insulin resistance has nothing to do with fat or increasing your salt intake. Insulin resistance is down to carbohydrates. That's the problem.
Yeah. And Peter, you how do you feel about the salt factor? Because, obviously you have to watch your blood sugar, but what do you think?
Yeah, there are several things, again, related to insulin. And first of all, when you're type 1 or type 2 diabetic as well, it's almost the default that the doctor will tell you, just like they focus on cholesterol, they will also tell you limit your salt intake and maybe even limit your protein intake, because it puts a load on the kidney. But in terms of salt, it all has to do with insulin, because insulin has a vasoconstrictive effect. So it will already reduce the volume of your blood flow. And secondly, I think that also has to do with it. Also, I'm saying immediately that I'm not a doctor, but what we as carnivores and people on a ketogenic diet learn is that we have to eat a big meal once a day at least to restore electrolyte balance. And that is because with a large insulin peak, your kidneys get signaled that they have to rebalance the salt. So they bring salt back into the blood flow. And of course, if you are hyperinsulinemic, then I imagine that you get this effect like doubled, tenfolded. And of course, then you have to limit your salt. That would be one way to reduce your blood pressure, because I guess in those situations, it makes sense to reduce salt. It will have an effect, but it's not the cause.
Well, here's the thing, like with all this salt nonsense. Everybody's got to do their own due diligence, because, when you look at the functions of sodium in our bodies, we need it. And there's a lot of different functions for sodium. So sugar, basically your brain needs a little glucose and our bodies make its own sugar. So when they're instantly coming out of the gate saying, cut your sodium, well, from what? From processed food and garbage where sodium is by itself, or in a nice mineral salt that's complete with chloride and different little minerals that are adding to your health? And it's interesting. There's a doctor, his name's Brian Artis. He's very controversial. He's got a lot of cool things. But when you're having a coronary event and you call an ambulance, he points out that first thing they do is plug you into a saturated saline solution. So if you have to cut out salt for your blood pressure because of your high blood pressure that could cause a heart attack, why is it that when you're having a heart attack, they jack you full of salt? That just, to me, doesn't make any sense at all. And that's the go-to to hydrate you. So maybe the blood pressure, if you focus on hydration, lowering your sugar, and Peter just talked about insulin being a constrictive pressure. So it's always, they put these things into one package, and it's always way more nuanced. And Mark, insulin, getting back to insulin, it's all relative. So, well, let's talk about the cholesterol. Like you just mentioned, they'll say lower your cholesterol to like whatever it is. They want you at 150 now. I think that's the center, which we all can agree that's probably way too low, let alone lowering it unnaturally with drugs. It's a mess. So when you're steering people towards this, Mark, how do you deal with the people that push back and say, well, my doctor says? How do you navigate that?
It's very, very hard, because we were all taught this for a very, very long time about cholesterol, and being on a high fat diet is very, very bad for you. It's going to clog your arteries. And so, yeah, it's very, very hard to try and convince someone when it comes to cholesterol, and especially trying to increase cholesterol. But again, I just go by how these people feel. So I'll just go on a week-to-week basis, and they'll turn around and say to me, Mark, I feel lighter. I feel like my inflammation has gone down. Mark, I feel like I've got more energy. I've got better brain fog. Like, my mental health is getting better. I don't get pains in the gym. Like, you know what I mean? That's when I say, okay, well, just keep going. And then when they go to the doctor and the doctor sees the reading, and let's say the cholesterol has gone up, say 90 or 100, and let's say it's 260 within 6 weeks.
Yeah.
This is when the questions come in. This is when they're like, okay, but my doctor is very, very concerned about my cholesterol. He wants to put me on medication. And again, none of us are ever going to go by against what the doctor says. We're not saying that whatsoever. But what we're saying is that if you're in a situation where your cholesterol is very, very high, your life has improved dramatically. You're a lot healthier. You know what I mean? Your digestion is good. Your energy is just practically everything is good. Well, then you need to go back to your doctor and you need to question that. You need to question, okay, why are you putting me on this statins?
Yeah.
Why are you asking me these questions when I went to see you 2 months ago? I wasn't at my best. I wasn't feeling good. My inflammation was very, very high, and you couldn't tell me the reason why.
Yeah.
Whereas now, everything has been reversed.
Yeah.
And so, are you going to give me the answers that I need? And more than likely, the doctors in that situation are going to be amazed, because that's one thing I have seen, is that when people do have these conditions reversed, they're scratching their head and they're like, how is that possible?
It happened to me. Like, I'm going to just give you the numbers here before we talk about how many meals we eat in a day, because I like that, Rick. Good. When I the first time I got my cholesterol, I was keto. I had just started coming down from pre-diabetes, so I had regular blood work done. My HDL was 1.15. My triglycerides were 0.65, and my HDL was 400, or my LDL was 400, and I felt amazing. So my doctor was like, "Here, you need a statin," and I'm like, "How is it humanly possible to be getting worse?" But like, my body fat percentage is going down. My pain is gone. I'm mentally clear. Clarity is going through the roof. And you're telling me I need a drug because I'm going to die faster?
Tony.
These people like to go on about LDL. But see, LDL is not cholesterol on its own.
No.
That's what they don't understand. So
it's mobilizing fat.
Yeah, that these people focus way too much on LDL, way too much. But they don't talk too much about triglycerides, and that's the issue. So, I mean, there's a guy on social media. We probably all know who this person is, but he's constantly talking about LDL and heart disease. And when you look at studies, and when you look at, like, the three of us, we are the data, we are the research. I can tell you, like I said at the very, very beginning, my LDL is going through the roof. I know it is.
Yeah.
I know if I went to see the doctor,
I don't care.
It would be very.
Yeah, well, you're talking about we are the research, N of 3. But if people want to see more, look into the Citizen Science Project and the cholesterolcode.com, and we can dive into all the details. I don't think this is the proper place, but you can look at the ratios of all the lipoproteins and that sort of things.
Yeah.
But in that community, in that data set, you'll find people with total cholesterols or even LDL cholesterols of 600. And I'll tell you, I am one of them. My total cholesterol at some point, Now it isn't anymore, but it has been almost 1 gram per deciliter. So
Wow.
1,000 milligrams total cholesterol.
Well, that just goes to show you that it's very gray. And your metabolic status and how you're mobilizing fat and using fat and your body's borrowing, like, we'll just go like quick Cole's Notes version. LDL carries around stuff in your body. If you need more stuff, your body's going to produce more of the LDL. That's pretty much a very simplified version.
Just putting this one below for the moment.
Rick eats 3 to 5 pounds. Along with a pint of yogurt and 4 ounces of cheese, and he's only 190 pounds. And we can get into that a little bit. And that's 3 to 5 pounds of meat. He is 6'6", though. He's pretty tall. I'm only 5'6", so he towers over me. Peter, what are you eating? And we'll tie this into the protein and fasting.
Not like this. Well, in terms of calories, probably more, but 3 to 5 pounds of meat. Wow. No, I'm at
but he
1.5
meals, I think. So.
Per meal? No, right? I don't think so.
Rick eats 3 meals a day. How many meals do you eat?
Yeah. So 3 to 5 pounds in total. Yeah. So spread over 3 meals, I would manage, but I don't think I need it personally. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And what about you, Mark? How many times do you eat a day?
I'm eating 3 times a day as well, and I'd say I'm eating around maybe 2 or 3 pounds of meat a day. But my fats are very, very high. I'm eating in the excess of maybe 300 grams of fat a day, probably more.
Well, yeah, I eat once a day just because it's convenient. Even if I try to eat 2, I end up eating 1 big one and I don't need to eat after. So depending on when I get home from the office, or depending on what I'm doing, I let my sort of myself guide it. And I eat till I usually cook more than I need, and I eat till my body says stop. I just actually went and helped a friend, a physical, which is kind of cool. We'll get into the protein about it, but I worked like a 10.5-hour day helping my friend's moving company. So I came out of retirement because I did that while I was in school, running circles around these guys, half my age. Unbelievable. Like out of the like just the energy level was through the roof. I don't go to the gym. I don't do cardio. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't have to have lunch. I was running upstairs lifting heavy shit, and they're dying. And it was like, holy crap.
I did this last year, actually. I actually had a big meal. I think this was back in November, or it was October or November. And I had a big, massive meal, and I did a 3-day fast.
Yeah.
3-day fast. And I was able to go to the gym for 3 days, do weight training. I could still hit PBs. I was really strong. And I didn't have any food for 3 days.
Yeah, and Rick's mentioned this, like, people are amazed how much energy he has. Same thing with me. And anyway, I got home and I crushed like 3 pounds of steak. And it was time. Like, my body was just like ready to do it. But I mean, anyway, Peter, what do you think about that? How's your energy?
Oh, my energy is fine. And actually, now that I think about it, if I would be cycling or so, if I do day-long cycling, I would eat those 3 to 4 pounds of meat. I remember that one day, because I don't really plan my rides. In the morning, I put a very nice piece of, I don't remember what it was, but some nice piece of lamb, very big piece, with the idea of eating it across 2 or 3 days. It was quite expensive. And then I went on a bike ride, and afterwards I finished like 2.5, 3 pounds. But that was back then while starting Carnivore. So then you are still amazed about these things.
Yeah, and you know what? We're going to tie this back into Bloodwork right now, because how do they test that? How do they test your energy? How do they, like, you go into the doctor and you say, I feel, earmuffs, fucking amazing. But yet, here's a drug, you know? And it's like, and I fully believe that these blood tests can, you know, if you're consistent with them, they can tell you a story. You can kind of, but is it necessary? I would say, you know, like Mark says, feeling good today is probably the best indication that you're going to feel good tomorrow. And if you start feeling better, that's the way you want to be rolling. If you're feeling worse.
At the end of the day, how can you argue to someone if you feel amazing? How can someone turn around and say to you, listen, you're not healthy.
Yeah.
But like, you're walking around and you're like, okay, but I don't hang on a second. You're saying to me I'm not healthy eating this way, but I feel amazing. I feel fantastic. Like, I feel the best I've ever been. I mean, we're all in a situation now. I know me and Tony are a similar age. I feel like I'm 21.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm young again. I feel like I'm able to do the stuff now that any 50-year-old can do.
Yeah.
When most people now, when they get older, they settle for what the doctor says. I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to allow my body just to get old, and that's it. It's incredible. The amount of times I go to the gym, and I hear people in the gym talking about recovery. They're trying to recover. They're talking about I have a few niggles. I'm sore after I'm sore after a spinning class, and I'm like, I'm 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
I'm 10 years old, and it amazes them when they turn around. Oh, but I'm 40 years of age. I'm like, yeah, but I'm 50 years of age.
Yeah.
And I feel incredible. I feel absolutely amazing. And they're like, they don't understand that what they're doing by going to the gym every single day and just eating the same shit every single day. They're literally just.
And that's
yeah.
No, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, just to bring it back, and I think you were trying to say the same, Tony, to bring it back to blood lab tests. When you do things like extreme exercise, for example, but also if you're not consistent in the way you measure your blood labs in terms of time and fasting and that sort of things, you can get all kinds of crazy results. So since blood lab tests, I mean, you can compare them with reference values of population, but you can also compare them relatively to your own markers, like what happened half a year ago, how did it change?
Yeah.
And then you have to be still very careful, like doing it exactly at the same time. And if, for example, a marker, your lipid marker, for example, is very dynamic, if you have been fasting for slightly longer, then suddenly your LDL can be much higher. Or if you're drinking a lot of coffee, some people get higher triglycerides, that sort of things. So it's very tricky business and very dangerous if a doctor, by seeing one marker, changes medical intervention.
You made a good point there, Peter, because I think, when you're dealing with lifestyle and lifestyle medications, if you get something where the doctor is prescribing you lifestyle medications, you need this for the rest of your life, or you need this, basically saying if you don't take this, you're going to die, because that's basically what they're saying. You need to look at your lifestyle. And you need to start looking at people that are resolving issues. I am a carnivore. I eat meat. That doesn't mean I'm perfect. But when I look at, if anybody tried to step in, I will argue with anybody, because you can't tell me that I don't feel good. And
you know what the big problem is as well? I think a lot of people are afraid to ask the doctor questions.
Yeah. Well, in my country, the doctor has 10 minutes. So you ask him one question. That's all you get. You have to make another appointment. So already, and this isn't the doctor's fault. This is our system that has been like, it's just out of control. So now, because my mom, who was, she's had her share of issues, she would, like, our family doctor retired. And ever since he retired, it's been a nightmare. So they don't have the same bedside. They used to come to my house when I was a kid. Like, that was the bedside manner. And now and it's not their fault. I know this because I have some friends that are doctors, and they have strict policies to follow. And, they get sidelined and railed. And I mean, I can go all day about this, but it's really, we should be asking questions. And I would encourage anybody to ask these questions. And unfortunately, you may have to go on your own and really dig into this. And if it matters, question Peter. You know what? If you're a type 1 diabetic and you have a problem with what Peter's doing, learn about it. Go and challenge him and learn, because I guarantee you, if you really are honest and you really, really dig into it, you'll see what it's all about. And the same thing with Mark. every day I see your videos, Mark, about some guy saying if someone talks about calories, unfollow them, disfriend. It's like, are you serious, man? You're telling people the same regurgitated garbage for them not to take responsibility for their own stuff and follow the shit that got them sick in the first place. That's basically what it is. So
100%. I'm the same. I'm the same as you, Tony. If someone came to me and said, "Listen, I'm a type 1. I've been told this, this, and this," I'd be like, "Listen, you need to speak to Peter. Peter's actually going through this. I mean, you don't need to. Don't worry about the research. Don't worry about the doctors. Don't worry about the dietitians. I'm going to put you on the phone to Peter. He's going to tell you exactly what you need to do because he's actually gone through it." And you know, I would have no issues with doing that because that's what we should be doing. We should be listening to people that have actually gone through this.
And in general, Mark, that's also a thing. Doctors, they have gotten a little bit of, well, a little bit, also a lot of education, and you can agree with the education or not, but they didn't have 20, 30 years of suffering in terms of what we or other people had to go through. And you learn really a lot when you have to go through things that affect your daily life. Just the reason to dive into all this is much stronger, much more inherent. And a doctor, he learns it from a book and sees a lot of patients, and that on itself has other value, and learns a lot during university education.
Can I just
but it's learned from a book.
I just add in one more point. I haven't seen my doctor in about 3 years, maybe a bit longer. And my doctor is overweight. Okay, he's around, I'd say around 5'3", maybe 5'4". But when you look at him, he's definitely carrying a little bit of weight. Okay. Now, when I as I said, when I used to go to see the doctor, I used to be convinced this guy is trying to save my life. So when I was sick, I was like, I need to go to the doctor. I need to be put on medication. I need to be put on all these different medicines because I knew he wanted to look after me. But it wasn't until I moved into this space. And then when I actually started listening to people, the likes of Tony, the likes of Peter, the likes of Ken Berry, Dr. Shafee, all these people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people then start coming out and saying, like, listen, I've had diabetes, I've had PCOS, I've had mental health issues. I was always worried about my blood markers. I was always worried about cholesterol, always. And these people are coming out with a different statement now saying, like, listen, I was like you. I listened to the doctor, but now I don't do it anymore. I go by how I feel. I'm not going by what the doctor says to me anymore. I don't need a blood panel sheet. I don't need to get my bloods done every couple of months because, like Tony mentioned it, like Tony mentioned earlier, it's very, very expensive to get your bloods done.
Yeah, right. Which is
in my country, it's around 300. It's around 300, 400 euros a month.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Like saying this, okay, Peter, we're gonna shift gears here a little bit because yes, blood work. You know, we kind of just we all sort of how we feel. Now, when Peter, you explain your diet to somebody, what do they say about blood work? What are the biggest things that they mention to you? Like when you tell them that you're full carnivore and that you're a diabetic, what do they say?
Yeah, it's funny. Two things happen. For example, my endocrinologist, when I tell that I'm on a keto diet, more so than when I tell that I'm on a carnivore diet, but if I tell that, she's almost seems in favor in terms of, she's thinking about the blood glucose regulation. But then of course the cholesterol story comes up, and let's not go back to that one again. But that of course is makes them very hesitant, and I can understand it because from their position it seems a tricky business. And they prescribe statins to almost all diabetic patients, and suddenly there is this guy doing very good for blood glucose regulation, but going sky high with cholesterol. Mm-hmm. But another thing that happens is that having virtually 100% blood glucose control for a type 1 diabetic. That doesn't happen. I'm really asking everywhere to people, do you manage to get full blood glucose control while eating carbohydrates, while eating, say, more than 50 grams of carbohydrates a day? I haven't found them. A lot of time people show up saying that they do, that they lead a happy life, and okay, I believe that, and they feel healthy. I believe that as well, on a medium carb diet. But when you ask further and ask about A1C and blood glucose control, it's always like time in range 80%, maybe 90% if they are really expert type 1 diabetics. But in range means between 80 and 180. That's not non-diabetic range. So if you ask for the non-diabetic range, it will probably be like 65, 70%. And everywhere in the non-diabetic community, you will hear people, and that's the other side. I mean, it's not as bad. It's not that bad if your blood glucose goes to 110 or even 120. But in the non-diabetic world, people are already scared of that sometimes, which is not needed. But just to paint the contrast.
And quite often, like, this is the problem with a lot of this stuff is the reference ranges, and compared to what? Like, you can say I'm perfect, but compared to what? Perfect like you didn't break your leg. Perfect like you don't get headaches anymore. What does that mean? So quite often when I'm talking to people, and I see a lot of people with addiction, a lot of people with pain, and I ask them about their diet, and I'm at the point now where I'm almost scared to do it because I have to ask it, and I'm just like, what is their conception of healthy? Because they'll say, no, it's not, my back hurts. I've slipped a disc in my back. I need some help with pain. What's your diet like? Oh, my diet's good. I eat healthy. What the hell does that mean? How, Well, I make sure I have some fruit in the morning. I eat yogurt with a bunch of berries and a little bit of maple syrup because it's natural sugar, blah, 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 blah. It's always the same thing. And you're looking at that going, wow, like, this is where we get into this stuff. So those people going to the doctors and getting the blood work and getting this, it's all over the place. And Mark, like, your thoughts when you hear people say that, what is your opinion about their diet? How do they react when you say you're wrong?
What can you say, to be honest with you? Like, look at it, you're like, listen, like, you can keep telling me that your diet's healthy. I'm telling you now, your diet's not healthy. Period. You can keep telling me that eating a bowl of oats every morning is extremely healthy for you, and again, I'll just keep telling you, like, listen, you're full of shit. Period. That's it. It's that simple. And I just don't think people understand that when it comes to carbohydrates, whether they're complex, simple, like, at the end of the day, I only did a video on this today. All carbohydrates do the exact same thing. It doesn't make a difference what carbohydrate it is. And I just don't think people can get past that.
And what you're saying, Mark, is good, because Peter will verify this. Maybe the only difference in the carbohydrates you eat is how fast it gets into your bloodstream. Peter, can you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's right? The thing.
And that's coming from a guy. This is Peter, who needs to know this stuff. So if he's saying it, like, his life is on the line, if he was eating a large bolus of some natural sugar, ask him how it does in his bloodstream, right? Like, that's a pretty good...
Yeah, and I've seen the video that Mark saw, and it's a bit a tricky thing, of course. This guy was right in some points. He was talking about, he was comparing bananas with sort of cookies with salt and sugar. And those, he called them hyper palatable and designed by industry. And he was right, of course. I mean, I guess you are better off eating bananas instead of that stuff.
Well,
and he was also telling about the good nutrients and the fiber. Even the fiber is good in this case because it helps to reduce slow down the glucose. But
see, the problem,
besides that,
see, the problem is, though, when it comes to these fruits, these people don't understand this. 100 years ago, our fruits were completely different. Completely different. So I can guarantee you, like a banana 100 years ago was not anywhere near as tasty as what it is.
And one thing that we talk about when these guys, especially your video today, and this is the shameless plug time. If you guys want to hear about our conversation on Thursday, just go to Peter or my channel and click the link. We had a great conversation about a lot of this stuff about that. But now is different than then, and your age, your metabolic health, and your metabolic status is different than then. So when these people come on and they just generalize all the things are the same for everybody, that doesn't make a lick of sense. So when this guy's spouting off that bananas are good, telling a type 1 diabetic to eat bananas without the context, without the nuance, without the whole story is just flat out wrong. And this guy is telling us to unfollow us because we are talking shit, which doesn't make sense. We got a comment. Do you want to answer that, Peter? That's in your wheelhouse, buddy. Hi,
yeah,
TV.
I think we can all three answer it perfectly, because what's best fruit for a diabetic is also the best for a non-diabetic. Well, if you want to eat fruit, it's not needed, but if you want to, and I eat fruit as well sometimes in summer. When I do a lot of biking, I might eat even a small banana, but generally speaking, that's on the bike, right? So that's a very different situation. There I would eat that, but normally I wouldn't eat a banana. I think of fruits like avocado, which in the biological sense is fruit, of course. Berries as well, although personally I don't eat them that much. What else? Well, if I think back about the time that I was on a mixed diet, you have to discover yourself, but I actually ate apples sometimes, which to me sounds crazy now because they are full of carbohydrates. They are basically starch. But you could even eat those things in terms of anti-nutrients and that sort of things. They are not so bad. But I would stick to the berries at most, and be careful of addictive side effects.
What do you think, Mark?
When you look at the low glycemic index on the usually berries are usually your best book. So blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, but again, just in small portions. You don't need a large amount. I would also recommend an avocado. Avocados are amazing because they're very, very rich in sodium. They're very, very rich in potassium. That's what your body actually needs. And again, it just comes down to your preference and what you can actually tolerate. But if you want to look at the lowest, I would say you can't go wrong with berries.
Okay, I'm going to chime in here with a little different twist on this. Now, what kind of fruit depends on where it's from, how it got there, how it's grown, if it's in season. If it's not in season and it's brought in from another country and it's sprayed with a bunch of chemicals, you can bet to hell that fruit it doesn't matter what nutrients it comes with, is not good for you. But if you're living in the equator and you got mangoes growing on the trees, you obviously being a diabetic, you have to be wary of the load. Obviously, fiber is going to slow down some stuff. You'd have to be tricky. Do I eat fruit? Not from here, unless it's summertime and it's off a tree. If it's in the supermarket, you can bet to God they sprayed those apples way underripe. That's when all the defense chemicals are heightened because the plant still doesn't want you to eat the fruit yet. So the fruit must be ripe for it to be healthy. And this is where we get into a lot of problems. So when you have Paul Saladino, for instance, eating fruit like a champion in Costa Rica in the beautiful sun, ripe fruit on the tree is a far cry different than me eating strawberries from California. So you have to look at everything here. And I mean, I'm not going to say what fruit is best. I'm going to say you better be sure of where it's coming from and how it's grown and what's been done to it, because that's, I think, the biggest problem with our produce now is, vegetables included. Why I don't eat vegetables, most of the reasons is because they come on a truck sprayed with chemicals, and God knows what they've been done.
That's another reason why I don't buy my meat in our supermarkets, because when you look at the packaging and you look at the labels, like you've got sugar, you've got hidden sugars like dextrose, you've got ingredients that you've never even heard of. So it comes to like meats and like Tony mentioned, and fruits and veggies, the last place you want to be buying it is in a supermarket.
Yeah, nice detail about that one, Mark, is that people a lot of times in Europe look at the package and they read these E numbers, and one of them is ascorbic acid.
Yeah.
And when I tell people about it, I always get comments like, yeah, well, it's just vitamin C. And there's some truth to it, but it's not the full story. I mean, it's a component of it, and if you eat it, it's not that bad as an E number, but still, if you eat it, it doesn't have the same balance as natural occurring vitamin C. So it could actually disbalance a little bit things in your body.
I like this. Can we put that comment up, Peter? I'm going to address this one if we don't mind.
The pesticides?
No, organic lemons. And yes, that is true about pesticides.
So good.
My biggest thing about this stuff is, honestly, when we do a carnivore diet, and actually I was just having a great conversation with one of my new clients. His name's David. Hi, David. I know you're watching. It's always contextual. And like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing? And I believe, honestly, especially with fruit, vegetables, plants, all the stuff that we just look at, broccoli is healthy. But when we look at where did it come from? What was in the soil? How was it cultivated? Where was it brought from? How long has it been in the store? What's been done to it? That's the problem. And when we go carnivore, animal-based, and we focus on essential nutrients, we cut out all that potential problems. Microbiome, glyphosate, pesticides, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying if you have a farm or a garden and you are loving your soil and planting your stuff, if it's in season, you would eat it. That would be the natural way to do it. So when you say organic lemons, okay, like in a broad sense, I don't have a problem with somebody using some lemon and some water or eating some lemons to, for fish but where are they coming from? How far away were those lemons? Were they picked before they were ripe? And where were they presented? So these are the tricks that people get into. And we have organic, non-organic, blah, blah, blah. But how do you know? Do you know the produce manager at your grocery store? Do you know the farmer? Do you know the shipper? That's where we get into the devil's in the details. So if you have a lemon tree and you're living in Florida, go nuts. I would say that would be probably you're not going to be sucking too many lemons. I mean, obviously nature is going to just guide you. But that's where we get into this stuff. And guys, I want to hear your thoughts on that because, I know we don't really eat vegetables, but Mark, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I completely agree with you, Tony. That's the reason why I just don't eat them anymore, because they were just causing major problems for me. And I didn't have any idea why. But now after listening to you and learning more about stuff, this is why I just chose I'm not buying it anymore.
Yeah. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, same thing. And I actually also eat organic lemons, and I do buy them at the supermarket. And I know, indeed, I always think about this same argument that you talked about, that you cannot be sure. And the same holds for organic coffee. So it's the best guess. I will still buy organic. Yeah. But that's.
So, speaking of organic coffee, the same thing. Like, I'm a coffee drinker. I mean, I don't know if it's an addiction or if it's just I love it, whatever. It is one of those deal breakers. I give it up once or twice a year just to see how I feel. Usually I just like it. So I don't really get any withdrawals from the caffeine. But the coffee side, I will say this. One time I was kind of in a pinch and I needed some. It was on special. And I think it was Maxwell House or some shit. And I grabbed it that morning. Holy Christ, I felt way out of sorts. And I was like, the difference between like buying a nice organic coffee that I do my best. I don't ethically sourced we know Dave Asprey talks about mold in beans, and it is a problem. And if you're affected by it, it can be a serious problem, but you do your best. And I bought this shit that was like, the big box coffee stuff. And I felt like garbage. And I was like,
most coffees are extracted from a plant.
Exactly. They're beans, they're seeds, they're highly defended, and then you have the mold problem. And that's the biggest problem with coffee is the heat doesn't destroy the mold. So if you have mold growing on the beans, and every coffee place on the planet, how do we know? And that's the thing. That's where a lot of this stuff, I think, with with like how you navigate the plants. And like, Duncan, in Scotland, man, like, you know what? This is where it comes down to. When you got Inuits eating in the frozen tundra, eating like what they can get, there's no plants there. But you have somebody in like the lush rainforests of the Amazon would probably know how to forage their plants. So we're somewhere in the middle. And things, are they natural? I would argue, seasonal, local, and coffee is one of those things. It's a gray area. Peter, how do you feel? I know you drink coffee, so what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a bit like, I mean, you'll even find the odd carnivore that is smoking. So just to say that, yeah, I know that coffee is not good, and it's not even for the caffeine, probably. I mean, that might affect sleep as well, of course, but also all the other plant components in it. Yeah, it's a vice that I accept.
And you know what? I just wanted to, we'll get back to sort of the blood side of things. And one thing, when we're adapting a carnivore diet, when you're eating an animal-based diet, you're eating protein. Well, that's where I wanted to go. Sorry, Mark. Not only does the protein, are we getting the right amount of amino acids in the right amount of natural ratio with the right amount of stuff we need for our building blocks, but it comes with the B vitamins. Now, Bloodwork, I know for a fact the only B vitamin we store is B12. So when they test for our B12, they might be able to figure some stuff out. All the other B vitamins are water soluble. You are constantly using them for metabolic functioning, for your brain, for breathing, right? So how do you test for that? Now, I know the RDAs are basically a best guess, and there's no upper tolerable limit. They don't have it documented. B2, riboflavin, thiamine, niacin. So, Mark, we're going to get into the protein side, but what do you think about that with B vitamins?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And this is another argument I have with vegans, and especially when it comes to like protein. Vegan will tell me that like tofu and a piece of meat are completely different, but it's incredible, because when you mentioned the B12, a lot of vegans will lack in B12 because they don't get enough of it, because we know we can get any. Yeah, we can get a lot of 12 in like the meats that we eat. So when you ask a vegan, okay, where are you getting your B12 from? They're like, okay, I'm getting it in a supplement. But these people will argue the case when it comes to protein that we've been eating for such a long time. It contains all 9 aminos, all 9 essential aminos. Vegans don't have any essential amino acids, no matter what you're eating. It doesn't make a difference whether you're eating broccoli, whether you're eating tofu. You're not going to get the amino acids in these foods whatsoever. So it's incredible when you hear people say that it's not possible.
Yeah. Peter, any thoughts, Peter? I know you're muted. We can't hear you, buddy.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. Yeah, it's nothing to add.
We got a question here. I like that.
Oh yeah.
I'm on the Carnivore. Should I count proteins? Well, here's the beautiful thing. I'll, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to take this one. You can, but really, counting protein, I guarantee you, will lead to eating enough. And eating enough will give you all the essential amino acids you need. Now, the only thing I will say about some of the other amino acids that we have to be wary of, when you're eating a carnivore diet and you're cutting out all the other plant stuff, you're not dealing with any anti-nutrients. And one in specific that I'm very aware of is glycine. Mm-hmm. Why? Because glyphosate, which is weed killer Roundup, which is globally, now it's in our cycle of water. So you have to be very, very careful about that, because we can make it a little bit in our bodies if we have the right building blocks. But if you're eating a mixed diet, glycine becomes very important. So, this is the problem, is the glyphosate can disrupt your normal glycine process. But if you're eating an all meat diet, counting protein, you know what? If you're trying to discover how much you need, you can do it. But if you're eating enough to satiety, just for the general layman, you know you're getting what you need. And if you're still hungry, eat more. If you're not, that's and then you don't have to worry about this stuff. So counting, if you eat meat and you eat meat to satiety, you are getting the right amount of amino acids in the perfect amount of ratios, because we can get into the weeds, but I don't want to do that.
I mean, when you think about it like this, Peter, when we look at our ancestors who used to hunt their prey for like thousands of years ago, I can assure you these people never thought to themselves, "Oh, before I eat that, I need to find out how much protein."
Yeah.
These people just went out, they hunted what they needed to hunt, and they just ate.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I did carnivore, I would have struggled to get down a half a pound of meat. I would have really struggled.
Yeah. Now
I don't weigh any protein. I like Tony mentioned, I just eat now until I'm full. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm just giving my body exactly what it needs.
Yeah.
So I'm eating around maybe 2, maybe 3 pounds of meat a day. That's well over my, if we're focusing on like macros or calories, it's way over my. So
yeah, so you're way above the 1 or 2 grams
about the amount of protein that you're taking.
Yeah. Peter, okay.
I'm just saying, unless you're
kind of broken up on that, Mark. Peter, do you want to answer? Like, Mark, that's it. So basically, we eat meat and repeat. That's it. Like eat till you're full. Peter, do you want to address this question?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say also that I totally agree with this approach that Mark just described. I mean, you can measure your proteins and look at that 1 or 2 grams per, kilogram or pound of ideal weight, and that's all very nice. I mean, do it if you are having troubles with eating enough, but otherwise I would say doesn't matter, because you'll reach the protein goal anyway.
And
this one, yeah.
Just before you get into the question, Peter, I just want to just add to that as well, is for everybody that's kind of lost about this. Remember, when you start nourishing your body with what it needs, things change. So if you're not eating that much and you think it's going, you just remember, your stomach gets more acidic, your digestion gets better as you go. Your body will start telling you. So let's deal with a couple questions before we wind it up. Peter, do you want to deal with this question?
Yeah. What kinds of water? So yeah, if we get into all these types of water, then that's a difficult question for me. But I think adding a lemon would be nice for taste if you want to. But in terms of electrolyte balance and that sort of things, I don't think it's really needed. What I did a lot of times, especially in the beginning, but I tend to do it far less now. So probably it has to do with adaptation. Yeah. I added a lot of electrolytes in the beginning, and nowadays sometimes I still start the morning with a glass of water with lemon as well, and quite a big bunch of electrolytes in a small glass as a sort of kickstart. But often I will start with coffee, and that's yeah.
Mark, what do you feel about water? Which water is best? Just quickly, we'll get through this. We got one more question, then we'll end it out. Mark?
It doesn't really matter. I just wouldn't buy any bottles of water in the supermarket. I just make sure my water is filtered.
Yeah.
If you want to add lemon into your water, you can if you want to. But if you're looking to just get hydrated, I don't think you actually need it. I think you can't go wrong with adding salt to your water, or you can add electrolytes.
I'll just chime in here quickly. I believe in as close to Mother Nature intended. Back in the day, we would have had water running through streams, picking up minerals. If you're going to drink spring water, make sure the source is good. Obviously, don't overthink it. If it's been in a plastic bottle sitting in the sun, that's not a good idea. Filtering your water, good. Lemon, if it makes it better, good. Add minerals. Salt water dehydrates you. Distilled water dehydrates you. Find the middle ground. Let's deal with this one last question, Mark. Raw butter, raw milk, cream, raw blood. Ooh, Peter, you go with this one because I know you'll love it.
I've tried all of them, raw blood, not except maybe the blood that is part of the liver. I don't know if you can really call it blood, but always good. Yeah, I don't personally believe in a huge difference in terms when you eat a block of cheese. Yeah, it's better to go raw instead of pasteurized. If you have problems with cheese, you shouldn't eat it too much anyway.
That's it.
And recently, yeah, when it comes to dairy, personally, I eat one avocado now since a few weeks. So in terms of fiber, that's still nothing. It's nothing compared to the recommended 30 to 40 grams. But when I eat a lot of dairy, no matter on what diet you are, dairy constipates. And for some people, it's more of a problem than others. But I notice it. And if I eat one avocado with a lot of dairy, that avocado will help me to eat more dairy if I want to.
Okay, and Mark, quick thoughts on this before I wind this up. Your thoughts on butter, raw milk butter?
I would love to be in a position where I can eat dairy, because the one thing I struggle with is putting on weight. And when we eat a lot of dairy, it's very, very easy to put on weight. But I have a lactose intolerance, so when it comes to like milk and cheeses and stuff like that, it really destroys my stomach. So I try and avoid it as much as possible.
Okay, and then just my thoughts on it. You both said it pretty much blatantly. If you tolerate it, and just don't be surprised, things can change. I wouldn't count on it for your energy and being focused on it. If it's accompanying your diet and you can tolerate it, there's no problem with the plumbing or digestion. All for it, and the best quality as possible, the best sourced from an organic farm or something. Obviously, that would be the best choice in my opinion. I would drink raw blood like a vampire if I could have access to a tap. I've had blood in a package before, and it was delicious. To be honest with you, I eat raw liver, so I'm all about that. But unfortunately, once again, where's it coming from? If it was just in a pint, I don't know. So that's sort of our thoughts. So guys, we're going to wind this up for today. We'll see you next Sunday at 10 a.m. where we address more questions. We'll figure something out for a topic, and we'll kind of go with that. This is the Meat of the Matter podcast. That's Mark. He's Peter. I'm Tony, and we're here to help. And we appreciate you all for joining us today. The recording is going to be on our YouTube channels. You can catch Mark on his Fitness Beyond Time 01 on Instagram, Peter at the Dutch Carnivore, me most of the time at Food for Thought or Tony Stewart Coach. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for being with me. And boys, we'll see you soon.
Big Sam.
See you next time.